if the Hope probe is going to be able to be captured by Mars's gravity. Tell me how the UAE leadership made all of this happen.
First of all, I think we have to be realistic. What we have achieved so far, reaching that point that no one else from the region, from the Arab world or the Islamic world, have reached, is an accomplishment by itself. We put lots of efforts in this mission, but this is a program. And we have other things that we're planning for. So hopefully we have a 50% chance of orbiting in less than an hour. We would know. Hopefully we will be sending a message of hope to all of those scientists who are anxiously waiting for these informations. The aim is to contribute to the knowledge and contribute to the science. In very limited number of countries are exploring Mars, as you know, and we are hoping that this group of 200 people who have worked very hard in this program, with the highest concentration of women, around 34%, are deserve to be happy today and make us all happy. But regardless of what happened, I think we are satisfied that we reached something that no one else have reached from this region, as I said, and we have done it. 50% of the budget, 50% of the time it took us to plan for it and sending the Hope mission.
What is the message for the youth and for all the people interested in this world of science?
I think the message is in the name. It's hope. It's sending hope that we can do it. We can change the fact that we are only using the information from the others. We will be supplying information, hopefully, and we will be benefiting humanity. We are sending a message to all of our brothers and colleagues who are living with us that this country in 50 years have achieved this much. And in the next 50 years, we will be frontiering in so many fields. We will do it together, and I think our leadership, we're blessed with a leadership that put a plan and enable their people to do it and put all resources at their disposal to achieve the mission. We're very proud of what we have achieved, as I mentioned, and we look forward for celebrating tonight with everyone, all of the scientists around the world.
We're all proud and we're all so excited for this. Thank you so much. Who knows, one day we might be able to go to Mars as well.
Yeah, why not?
Thank you so much. All right, so a beautiful show is about to start on Burj Khalifa. This is what it feels like to be here in the UAE. We're all extremely proud and excited to know what's going to happen. And for sure, it's already a big story of success. This is the historical event, Hope Probe. Don't forget to check out the hashtags, hashtag Hope Probe and hashtag Arabs to Mars. And of course, in the UAE, always hashtag impossible is possible. Back to you guys in the studio.
And of course, if you want to get involved in the conversation on social media, we are at Dubai One TV. We're going to be reading out some of our favourite tweets, some of our favourite messages this evening. That was our reporter, Jad Shahayab, on location with His Excellency Sahel Al-Mazroui, the UAE Minister of Energy and Infrastructure. Lots of VIP guests coming up tonight.
Yes, we'll be keeping an eye on Jad down at Burj Plaza. Thanks, Jad. Now, we all remember how this journey started just under 7 months ago. It was Sunday, the 19th of July 2020, and after several delays due to poor weather conditions at the launch site at Japan's Tanegashima Space Center, the world finally heard the first ever countdown to launch in Arabic. Let's remind ourselves of that historic moment.
10 9 2 1 إطلاق.
Just saw there the launch of the Hope probe about 7 months ago, the first time the countdown was ever delivered in Arabic. Now, someone who knows just how much is at stake tonight is the Executive Director of the Space Sector at the UAE Space Agency. We're delighted to have him in the studio, Fahad Al-Masrouri. Thank you so much for joining us. What a night. Now, you joined the launch about 2 months before the probe took off to Mars. How are you feeling this evening?
Well, I mean, you can imagine, as His Excellency mentioned, I mean, the air is just ecstatic. If it would be appropriate, I'd probably jumping up and down on the table here in about an hour when everything moves forward. But, you know, it's not just about how we feel as part of the team. I mean, as you mentioned, I only joined the Space Agency actually almost a year ago now, and I was with you, Raymond, 7 months ago here in the studios when we had the launch. So it was an amazing accomplishment really then, and we are really excited about the MOI that's going to happen.
How do you feel watching back that footage, seeing the launch, hearing the historic countdown, the first time ever in Arabic? It was a truly amazing moment.
Definitely. I mean, so much has happened since then. You can imagine the whole Arab world is in on this now, right? And His Highness has, you know, the whole leadership of the UAE have really been supportive of this. With everything that's been happening, I think if you look around the UAE tonight, you'll see all the landmarks lit up in red, you know, representing the glow of what I guess the Hope probe will be seeing as it enters the Mars orbit insertion. We've seen the huge landmarks from Burj Al Arab, Burj Khalifa, Emirates Palace. You've got hotels. I've seen the Jebel Ali Hotel, forts around the country, and we've even seen really landmarks across Arab countries as well being lit up to really celebrate this moment. It's not just for the UAE, it is for all the Arabs, and it is to show and really represent the Arab world going back and showing what we can do with determination, with the leadership that we have, that nothing is impossible.
It really is a defining moment, isn't it? How did it all first come together? Because as we mentioned earlier, the project was initially announced about 6 years ago. There were a few skeptics back there at the time. How did it first all come together?
Well, it was first announced by His Highness and in 2014. Again, 6 years ago, that's a long time ago if you think about it, right? But programs like this do actually usually take about 10 years from a design phase all the way. And the UAE with the team have done such a great job in pulling it all together now just in the last 6 years. It's been an amazing accomplishment, an amazing experience for the UAE nationals, the 200 UAE nationals who have been part of this journey right from the start. I wish I was there at that time. I wish I was around to have experienced that as well myself. But it's just an honor to be here, though, and experience it now and represent the UAE Space Agency here with you today.
One of the big topics which we can't avoid is COVID, and obviously the launch went ahead despite the coronavirus pandemic, in spite of all the obstacles that puts up. And of course, you know, now Hope is on its way to Mars, and we're hoping for good news this evening. But how have you seen things change since that launch? The kind of the awareness of the UAE space program, is it increasing around the world?
Yes, definitely is increasing around the world. We're constantly in communication with countries all over the world. You may know we have the Arab Space Cooperation Group that was established. It was also an announcement by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid back in March 2019, where this group was created. And it represents 14 different space agencies and countries of the Arab world who, you know, we have been in support to grow the knowledge and awareness about what's happening in space. We've seen great initiatives coming out from some of those countries today. You know, Saudi Arabia have set things up as well, and they have the space agency, and they have a space law that's also been announced. And so a lot of things are happening, and we're looking at starting up a lot of initiatives there.
I mean, we typically see the big headlines from organisations like NASA, the European Space Agency, and I think this mission is a really important way to show that, you know, some of the smaller players can still have a big impact.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, China is also a huge player today, which never was in the scene before. India as well is a big player now, and now, of course, with the UAE coming in. And as was mentioned, there's not many countries who have gotten to where we are today.
Yeah.
So it's a huge opportunity for us to really be punching about our weight.
And it's interesting because, you know, it's kind of I don't know if it's competitive. You can maybe tell me, is it competitive But at the moment, there's another mission tomorrow from China on the 18th of this month. There's the US with a rover. So, is it competitive or is it very collaborative?
Well, look, competition is always good, right? But when it's about going to Mars, I think everyone just really wants to make sure they get there safely. So, of course, whenever there's talk, we're always banting about it. I think as any engineer would and as any person would. But this week is actually the next 10 days is going to be massive for science, for the humankind, and knowledge really about what's happening. So as you mentioned, Perseverance is going in. They have a first as well where they have Ingenuity. So they'll have the first flight going out. They have a device called MOXIE on there, which is actually going to be looking at converting the CO2 in the Mars atmosphere into oxygen. So these are all interesting tests that are going to be happening during that time.
Fascinating. Fahad, you're going to stick around throughout the entire show, which we're very grateful for. It's the reason we rebooked you, because you're so good. You've got so much knowledge about the UAE space sector, so thank you very much. But now, time for another guest. The Hope probe, of course, was designed and built by Emirati engineers in partnership with other space agencies around the world.
Collaborating on the mission since it started 6 years ago is a team of scientists at the University of Colorado Boulder.
David Brain is the Mars planetary scientist at the Laboratory for Atmospheric and Space Physics at the university, and he joins us now via video call from the good old US of A. David, good evening, good afternoon, perhaps morning for you. How are you doing this evening?
Doing very well. Thanks a lot for having me, and I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the programme. Now, of course, you worked with the UAE team to design and build the systems and onboard instruments that will study the red planet. What specifically did you work on, and how did the collaboration come about?
Yeah, the collaboration came about in a very interesting way, but the teams really meshed together very well. So people from the Emirates selected their partners very carefully, and we decided together to study the atmosphere of Mars. My role here was not associated with any one measurement or instrument, but instead to help oversee the entire science of the mission with my partners at MBRSC in Dubai.
So what kind of information will HOPE be gathering if the probe is successful? And how will this help us better understand climate change back here on Earth?
Yeah, HOPE will be gathering information, observations about the entire Martian atmosphere. And this is a new way of looking at the Martian atmosphere. Most previous missions have looked at one single time of day, but HOPE will be looking at the global atmosphere in every geographic region at every time of day. And when you do something like that, you can figure out how different regions are connected to each other, how the bottom of the atmosphere connects to the top of the atmosphere. You learn about how the entire atmosphere works as a system. And when you get an understanding like this, it can feed back on how your understanding of atmospheres work at any place in the solar system for any planet.
Of course, all eyes are on the probe tonight. What would you say is the riskiest part of the Mars orbit insertion, or is it just the whole thing?
It's the whole thing. It's one of the two most critical times in the mission, and we've already passed the first test of launch. The second test is being able to successfully stop when we've arrived at our destination. So this 27 minutes of burn from the spacecraft from start to finish will be a little bit nerve-wracking, but the team has practiced hard. And after we get information back from the probe, we'll be able to tell if we are in an orbit that will be able to help us move forward and complete our science mission.
Well, as we just mentioned, there is a 50% chance that the mission does go to plan. That also means 50% it doesn't go to plan. What is the outcome if this project is not a success?
Well, I think the project has already been a success, given the programmatic goals of the mission. So I'm not too worried about that aspect of the success. But for the scientists who want to get the observations, I'm not ready to throw in the towel if we get initial indications that things haven't gone well. There may be ways to help the spacecraft recover, and so it could take hours even to figure out whether we have a viable mission going forward. Of course, if we don't end up having a viable mission, if we aren't able to get those observations that we hoped for, we'll have to go back to the drawing board and we'll have to find another way to get the information that we set out to gather.
Well, David, thank you very much for joining us this evening. That is David Brain on the line directly from the US. He's been heavily involved in the project since the beginning. Fahad, I wanted to bring you back in here. We were speaking a little bit earlier about a bit of healthy competition between China and the US as well. I wondered if you could take us through some of the differences between our mission to Mars versus there. We know that the US team is going to be touching down on Mars. I know they have a rover. It's set to be the fastest ever rover, still moving at a glacial pace. What are some of the differences? Why aren't we touching? Actually, Fahad, just wait there 1 minute. I'll be back in just a second. I've just heard we've got a very special guest on location at the Burj Khalifa. Let's take a look at the world's tallest tower, lighting up tonight with a very special message for the world.
programme. But tonight, of course, is the most critical moment, whether Hope can enter the red planet's orbit. Once it reaches Mars, it will spend 2 years collecting scientific data.
Now, this will allow scientists to create a complete picture of the Martian atmosphere and its layers and better understand why it turned from a lush, vibrant planet into a cold, barren desert. Well, earlier today, I stepped into virtual space to get a detailed look at exactly how it works. 2020, a significant date for the UAE and a major milestone in the Emirates space race. The date that the UAE launched the Hope probe into deep space in the first ever Arab mission to Mars, the culmination of a 6-year effort from around 200 Emirati engineers, scientists and researchers. Now, whilst the objective of the Mars mission is to provide a detailed understanding of the climate and weather conditions of the red planet, the probe is a foundation for a much bigger goal, building a human settlement on Mars within the next 100 years. At around the size of a car, the Hope probe was launched in the early hours on board an H-2A rocket from Takashima Spaceport in Japan, beginning its journey of close to 500 million kilometres. The Hope probe separated from the launcher around an hour after liftoff, a critical moment in the entire launch process, timed precisely right for the Earth's closest alignment with Mars, a process which takes place only every 2 years. Now, as it settled its trajectory into space, the Hope probe deployed its solar panels and its sensors to locate the sun, manoeuvring to direct the panels towards the sun to begin charging the onboard battery. With the power switched on, the first signals from the Hope probe were detected by the NASA Deep Space Network ground station in Spain. As the unmanned spacecraft continued towards Mars, it used star tracking equipment to determine its location and direction, and ultimately to keep it right on track. 2 days after its launch, the Hope probe entered deep space, capturing and relaying the very first image of its final destination, Mars. It had already travelled 1 million kilometres from Earth, moving at a speed of around 120,000 kilometres per hour. On August the 11th, the Hope probe performed its first trajectory correction manoeuvre, firing its thrusters to ensure it was positioned on the best path to Mars, a critical moment as the first TCM performed since separating from the launcher. Now, during this time, the mission team conducted safety tests for around 45 days to ensure that the probe's instruments and systems were working perfectly and efficiently on board. On August the 24th, the Hope probe shared a second image of Mars. The photo showed that Hope had passed Saturn and Jupiter, with only Mars still ahead, marking 100 kilometres in its journey to the red planet, the equivalent of around 130 trips from Earth to the Moon. On August the 28th, the second trajectory correction manoeuvres were performed to further adjust its position towards Mars. It was now more than 200 kilometres into its journey and almost at the halfway mark. 2.5 months later, on November the 8th, the Hope probe successfully performed its third trajectory manoeuvre, setting the date of arrival to the orbit for February the 9th, 2021 at 7:42 p.m. local time. Now, during this phase, the team used the probe's 3 science instruments for the first time in space, conducting regular checks to ensure they were operating correctly ahead of their work to study the red planet's weather conditions. Tonight, the Hope probe will enter its 4th and most critical stage of its 7-month journey, the Mars Orbit Insertion. Now, the Hope probe will use its thrusters to burn off half of its fuel, drastically reducing its speed in order to safely enter Mars's orbit. Now, this process has a success rate of just 50%. If the Hope probe goes too fast or too slow, it could crash on Mars or miss its orbit entirely. But if all goes to plan, tonight will make the UAE go down in history as only the 5th country in the world to ever reach the red planet. Now, after entering Mars's orbit, the information that the probe's 3 special instruments collects over the next 2 years will help scientists begin to understand what the climate and weather is like here at different layers of the Martian atmosphere and create the first global picture of how the Martian atmosphere changes not only during the day but during the entire seasons as well. Now, researchers also plan to study why Mars's atmosphere is losing hydrogen and oxygen and the reasons behind the planet's drastic climate change. It's hoped this will help scientists better understand and be able to answer important environmental questions about our own planet as well. Several dozen probes have set off for Mars since the 1960s. Many never made it that far or failed to land. Only India has managed to enter the planet's orbit in a first attempt. Now, the UAE's mission is particularly unique, with an endeavour that has never been pursued by any other nation. Whilst other probes have orbited between the north and south poles of Mars, the HOPE probe orbits around Mars in an elliptical manner, completing a loop around the planet's equator every 55 hours. Now, this allows it to get as close as 20,000 kilometres to the Martian planet, the smallest ever distance reached by the probe to the surface of Mars. Its unusual elliptical orbit will allow it to observe the entire planet across both night and day in each cycle. Now, it's this orbit that will allow the UAE to complete the first ever planet-wide 24/7 picture of Mars's atmosphere and weather. Tonight, the UAE will lead the Arab world to new frontiers in deep space for the first time in history, acting as a catalyst to further accelerate the development of the education and technology sectors. Now, with the HOPE probe created by a team of Emirati engineers, scientists and researchers with an average age of just 27 years, and with women making up around 80% of the team, there's no doubt in anyone's minds just how important this mission really is. So as the UAE prepares to mark the 50th anniversary of the formation of the United Arab Emirates, tonight's milestone serves as a lasting reminder that for the UAE, not even the sky is the limit.
That looked like fun.
It was a lot of fun. I haven't done something like that before.
No, you haven't spent 7 minutes on Mars before. I'm so surprised.
That's on the calendar next week.
OK, our next guest has been involved in more than half a dozen NASA experiments. We're going to chat to him in a moment, though, because first we're going to throw to the break. Remember, if you want to get involved, you can join us at Dubai One TV. Going to hold that briefing.
Well, coming up after this break, the audit
of the Iron Rose.
Is it really fast?
No.
Do you eat it on Sundays?
Dad!
Hey!
Hold on, guys.
Daddy, be careful on the road.
Jerry?
Get back in your car right now!
Come on. We're getting out of here. We've lost the East Coast. Honey? China's dark. What is this?
Good enough.
World War Z, tonight, 10 p.m. UAE, 6 p.m. GMT. On the Dubai One. This movie is brought to you by
Important information about COVID-19 vaccination. Can I stop wearing the mask after receiving the COVID-19 vaccination? You must keep wearing a mask and continue to take precautionary measures to prevent COVID-19. Is vaccination safe for people with chronic diseases? Yes, vaccination is safe and effective, and it is recommended for people with chronic diseases because they are among the groups most vulnerable to complications of COVID-19. Can the date of the second dose of vaccination be changed to another day? We recommend that you adhere to the vaccination procedures and dates to ensure that you acquire the required level of immunity. Note, the second dose of the vaccination will be administered 21 days after receiving the first dose. Is it safe to combine more than one type of COVID-19 vaccination? No, it is not safe to receive different types of vaccines.
Welcome back. You are watching Dubai One TV's live special coverage of the Emirates mission to Mars. This evening, we're going to be speaking to the biggest experts all over the world, from NASA and beyond, to find out who exactly has been involved in this mission and why it's so important.
Yes, and our next guest has been involved in more than half a dozen NASA planetary, lunar and solar missions over the decades, starting with the Viking Mars landers of the 1970s, and is now the principal investigator for the Maven orbiter, which is currently gathering data from the Red Planet.
Now, he says that the Emirates Mars mission builds on all the missions that have come before it. He is a vital member of the science team for the UAE Mars mission, and he joins us now live from Colorado. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, you've been an integral part of the project for 6 years. How are you feeling right now, the anticipation?
It's exciting and at the same time very nerve-wracking because of the risk of going into orbit.
It is exciting, Bruce, and there is only, as we know, a 50% chance of success. What can we expect, though, if it does go to plan?
Well, first of all, that 50% is based on historical success rates. I think that this team has done everything that it can to be able to go into orbit successfully, and I'm very optimistic.
Now, we've heard there are 4 potential outcomes. We could either miss Mars entirely, we could potentially crash into Mars, we could do a bit of a loop around Mars, or the one we're all hoping for, it will be a successful plan. Take us through some of the potential options tonight.
Well, it's really hard to predict because everything is going according to plan right now. We're about 20 minutes away from the rocket motor burn to put us into orbit, and it's very hard to know what might go wrong. Anything that we think can go wrong has been addressed. But there are so many things. We've never gone into orbit around Mars with this spacecraft, even though we've tested the engines, we've tested the sequence. If something does go wrong, the team is standing by ready and do their best to recover from it.
Now, of course, we are all hoping that everything goes according to plan, but why is it so important that we gather this data with the HOPE probe over the next couple of years? You know, why do we need to understand more about Mars's atmosphere?
We're interested in understanding Mars for a number of reasons. One is by understanding how planets work, by understanding how the atmosphere and climate works on a planet with different boundary conditions than our own Earth. We learn more about how the Earth works. We're also trying to get at questions related to the habitability of Mars by microbes, whether there might be life there. And answering that question is really, in some sense, one of the overarching questions for Mars. Can we learn whether there's life there? What is that going to tell us about the origin of life here on Earth or about the distribution of life throughout the galaxy?
Now, the information that HOPE gathers will also be shared with the world for free to around 200 research centres. That seems quite unusual, but it's been an important part of the entire mission.
Well, that's one of the things that excites me. From the very beginning, the goal was not just to do a publicity stunt of getting to Mars, but to be able to contribute to the international scientific effort on Mars. And that's been an incredibly deep component of the effort so far. As a scientist working on Mars climate data, I'm very much looking forward to this data and to integrating it with everything else we know about Mars. No one probe can answer every question, but we're sending a lot of spacecraft to Mars, and that lets us bring a lot of data together to address some of the fundamental questions.
Now, of course, Bruce, 2 other probes will arrive at Mars this month, one tomorrow and one on the 18th. What can we expect from them? You know, how different will the data that they collect be from the HOPE probe?
They're all very different. The Chinese probe is the one that arrives tomorrow. They'll go into orbit, and they also carry a rover that will go down to the surface. The orbiter will be studying the atmosphere and the upper atmosphere in ways similar to what Maven is doing. The rover is going to analyze the surface chemistry and take images of the surface. In a couple of weeks, the United States is landing its Perseverance rover. That's a car-size rover that is going to be looking at possible evidence for life on Mars, and we'll be collecting samples that we can bring back from Mars to the Earth to study. So they're all very different from each other, yet very complementary, each one doing a different part, addressing a different part of the overall problem of understanding Mars.
And I think having this progress, whichever country it comes from, and being able to share and collaborate this information is so important. Of course, here in the UAE, it's hoped that the information we collect is really going to help set the stage in terms of establishing a human settlement on Mars. The UAE leaders have said they plan to do it within 100 years. How will this mission form a part of that?
There are so many hazards and so many risks associated with sending humans to Mars. Everything we know about the Mars environment helps us. By learning about the atmosphere and the surface, it helps get rid of those risks so we know what we're facing. Equally importantly, by understanding some of the issues about the Mars environment, it lets us frame the questions that we want to address when we do send humans. Is there life on Mars, or was there ever life on Mars? And why or why not?
Now, I have to say, you've been very much involved in the project. So working with our team here, we know there was around 200 Emirati engineers, scientists, researchers, and a remarkably young team, around 27 years old. So I want to ask you, what was your experience of working with them? What was that like?
Well, the first thing is that I've been incredibly impressed with the passion devoted to this mission, not just from the engineers and scientists working in the Mohammed bin Rashid Science Center, but all the way up what we call the food chain to the senior politicians, the senior leaders in the country. Everybody is enthusiastic, and the goals of the program are not just to learn about Mars, but to elevate the Arab world scientifically and to support the youth of the country to demonstrate what we can do, what the United Arab Emirates can do. To me, this combination of the science and the passion and the political goals, the social and societal goals, really set the Emirates Mars mission apart from most other Mars missions.
Bruce Joukowsky, thank you so much for joining us, giving up your precious time all the way from the USA. Really appreciate it. Fahad, how do you respond when you hear Bruce talking in such sort of glowing terms about the experience of working with the Emirati team? It is a young team, but they're very talented.
Makes us all proud. And I think, as Bruce mentioned, it's really coming from the top, right? It's coming from the leadership, and this is what really drives this country forward and has the youth so passionate about everything they do.
And I think that's something we're hoping to see a lot more of, aren't we? I know one of the aims of this mission is, of course, to get information about Mars, but also really to stimulate the economy, make it more of a knowledge-based economy. Fahad, if you can sit tight, a few more questions for you. However, our special reporter, Jan Shahayeb, is down on location. He is at the Burj Plaza. We'll get across to him now. He's got a very special guest with him this evening. We're just hearing we're having a little bit of a signal delay. So, Fahad, I want to ask you about how wonderful it is to be able to get such great feedback. What was it like collaborating with some of the big teams from NASA or from Europe as well?
Well, I think it's just been a huge opportunity for the team. You know, it's 200 UAE nationals have had the opportunity. They've traveled to the US, they've worked in the labs there, worked among experts, scientists, researchers, people who have done this before. And so it's nothing, it's nothing short but amazing, really, as an opportunity for them now to come and have put together the Emirates Mars mission and to show really where it is today.
Lots of guests here on this show, lots of guests down with Jad at the Burj Plaza. We'll be catching up with him in just a moment, but one of the lucky things that we've had on this programme throughout this whole experience is the number of people that have been working on it that are so talented, and they want to share that story because they want to excite the next generation, the people watching at home, and the younger generation as well. And I think that's one of the key messages we talked about last time. Yeah. Young people have been infused by this, and we're seeing an increase in the STEM subjects, the science subjects, aren't we?
Yes, I mean, if you go back to 1976, that was the year when His Highness Sheikh Zayed Al Nahyan, God bless his soul, first met with the Apollo 17 astronauts here in the UAE with NASA, and it was an exciting moment where they actually brought a rock from the moon with them. And that was a dream, right? The UAE was 5 years old at the time, and we are here today realizing Sheikh Zayed's dream of actually going out into space. And so you can imagine the excitement about that. And now moving forward, right? 2117, right? 2117 Mars mission. That's when we hope to be there. That's when we hope to have humanity there. And if nobody else does it until then, we will definitely do it in honor of our leadership today.
Well, I believe that we can hand over to Jad now. He's down at Burj Plaza and he's getting some of the big interviews down there, talking with some of the top people down there to find out what's been going out and what the latest situation is as well. So over to you, Jad.
All right. Yes, I'm still right here at Burj Plaza, right in front of Burj Khalifa, and really our hearts are beating. We're all extremely excited. And with me right now is Dr. Eric Xing, and he's the president of the Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence. How are you today and how are you feeling?
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to watch this amazing event. Yes, congratulations to the Arab world and to UAE for achieving this amazing goal.
Congratulations to all of us, all around the world. Really, this is something to really be proud of. Yeah, so I know that the Hope probe, upon its successful arrival to, hopefully, to Mars's orbit, is going to collect a lot of data. How is this going to influence or change the way we see science, and how is it going to change our future, possibly?
You know, Mars to the human being on Earth is an unknown world. So any data coming to us is a mystery. So, you know, all this data will expand our knowledge about the space, about the universe, and also about our Earth itself, because we may be learning, you know, a lot of, knowledge and maybe lessons from how Mars evolved in the past and how to protect our environment and how to make best use of a resource.
Because there's a lot of similarities between Earth and Mars, right?
Exactly. You know, we don't know whether Mars is our future or our past, right? So
what do we learn, like, from maybe the challenges that faced Mars? How can we fix maybe or find solutions for the challenges that we face here on Earth? And what is this message that's going to be delivered for the youth and the new generation?
Well, I think, Mars provides us a very good living example for how to build a ecosystem and how to build an environment that humans can thrive and survive and thrive, and also maybe build the future generations. And I believe all this data will be providing us a lot of knowledge to understand how geology, how atmosphere, how environment is changing in light of many of the changes and other interactions between the universe and also the ecosystem, solar system.
What's the next step after doing all of this and after gathering all of this information? Do you have any insights or anything that in the near future we might be able to explore?
In near future, I think we are going to collect a lot of information to improve, our experience and our knowledge about the space. But in the long run, I was looking forward to learn more about this planet so that we can move there. And, I wouldn't use the word colonize, but explore and expand, our living system and our environment.
Thank you so much for being with us, and hopefully we'll hear from you soon as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, 6 years ago we watched the movie The Martian, and it was like a dream. Maybe it was a sci-fi movie, but now it's right here in the UAE. The future is right here and right now. I'll go back to you guys in the studio right now, and I'll keep you posted if I have more interviews and with any more valuable information. So back to you guys.
Thank you, Jad. We're going to be crossing back and forth to him this evening throughout these celebrations and excitement live down at Burj Plaza. Well, if you want to get involved in the conversation on social media, make sure you tweet us. We are at Dubai1TV. Don't forget to use the hashtag Arabs to Mars. Now, the UAE has joined the world's leading nations in space research and exploration, opening up opportunities to form and accelerate the local financial landscape.
Dubai One's business editor Greg Fairley explains just what the country is doing to turn itself into a sustainable knowledge-based economy and why that's more important than ever before.
viewers, good evening. The UAE is fast becoming a major player in the space exploration sector. This has substantial scope for science and also, importantly, for business. This mission reflects a broader aim here in the Emirates to drive innovation in science and technology and continue to diversify the local economy. The probe serves as a catalyst for accelerating the advancement towards a knowledge-based economy that retains world-class researchers to work in scientific and technological fields. What is a knowledge-based economy and how can it catapult the UAE into the next era of growth? The UAE's Vision 2021 calls for the UAE to be a nation that is united in knowledge and where innovation also plays a key part. Getting the next generation of talent ready for a new age jobs market is essential for the continued success and progress of the UAE's economy. The investment-friendly environment here and ease of doing business continues to attract and anchor knowledge. Dr. Nasser Saidi is a former chief economist at Dubai International Financial Centre and is currently president of Nasser Saidi and Associates. I asked him earlier about the economic impact of the UAE Mars probe mission. This is what he had to say.
When you talk about a knowledge economy, you're really talking today about digital-based economies. And many of the activities and knowledge that you require for the space economy also translate into knowledge you're going to use for the digital economy and expanding the digital economy. So with time, I think what it means is that the UAE will invest more and more into STEM, into science, technology, engineering, and medicine activities. When you think further ahead, you want to think of space as a launching pad for space exploration into the moon and elsewhere. But I think also what's very important is to get young Emiratis engaged in this. And I think this is what's happening now, already happened with the Mars probe. We just need to widen the scope of the activities. And it has to start with education above all. That's where you build it.
The Hope probe, as officials point out, shapes a globally competitive economy that has a mission to find real solutions to the challenges we are going through today and those that will undoubtedly present themselves in the future. It prioritizes the diversification and resilience of the UAE economy's resources based on science and technology. With this year being the 50th anniversary of the UAE's foundation, the probe to Mars leads the path to further diversity of the economy, easing dependence on oil and gas. The UAE is one of the most attractive destinations globally for foreign talent and investment. With this important mission to the Red Planet, the country continues to embrace science and knowledge as we move into a new era of entrepreneurship, innovation and prosperity. Now, back to you.
That was Greg Fairley, our business presenter for Emirates News. Well, it's a really interesting time. It's about 7:30. In about 12 minutes, the Hope probe will begin burning about 50% of its fuel. Now, that is necessary in order to slow down enough to be able to enter Mars's orbit. If they go too fast, too slow, they could crash or miss the orbit entirely. It really is a pivotal moment of the entire mission. We're going to have more on that very subject for you a little bit later this evening. In a moment, we're going to be taking a break, so please keep watching Dubai One's special live coverage of the Emirates mission to Mars. Don't go anywhere.
He's 35 years old. He still lives at home. That is not normal.
I've lived upstairs since I was 3. It's gonna take a stick of dynamite to get me out of my parents' house.
I am a professional motivator. For many young men, self-esteem develops during a romantic relationship. So I simulate one.
Can I have a drink tonight?
I can have your son moved out of this house by June 15th.
Hallelujah!
For starters, you could make life a little more difficult for him.
Yeah! Your bathroom needs cleaning. When you're done with the rubber gloves, turn them inside out.
Something's wrong with your mom.
Can I have a minute alone with him? Oh, emotional crisis day is so critical. Totally bonds us. What's his real name, anyway?
I don't know. I just clean their teeth and chop off their...
I had a nice time.
I did too.
Good night.
Failure to launch, Wednesday, 10 p.m. UAE, 6 p.m. GMT. On Dubai One.
This movie is brought to you by
الخير هو اختيار لواكر منبع الخير.
Dubai Eye. One show will keep you informed and aware of the latest breaking news and government announcements. Interviews with government business experts to explore global and local markets and the latest updates of Dubai Expo. A platform to ask questions and get advice from the people in the know. Dubai Eye live on Dubai One, Sunday to Thursday, 6 a.m. UAE, 2 a.m. GMT on Dubai One.
You are watching Dubai One TV's special live coverage of the Emirates mission to Mars. If you want to join us on social media, we are at Dubai One TV. Make sure you use the hashtag Arabs to Mars.
Now, if tonight's Mars orbit insertion is successful, the Hope probe will spend the next 2 years gathering data for scientists back on Earth. Of course, most Mars satellites fly low enough to study the surface craters in detail, but researchers say this also limits their ability to study its global weather pattern.
That's right. Now, Hope's journey is particularly unique as it will fly higher than previous Martian satellites, providing the very first complete view of its atmosphere day and night and season to season.
Françoise Forguet is a research scientist who has worked on projects designed to model the environment on other worlds, including Mars, and currently he's the research director at the National Centre for Scientific Research in Paris, where he worked closely with the Hope probe's science team, and he joins us now all the way from France. Good evening for us, Françoise. Good afternoon for you. Tell us about your work with the UAE team.
Yeah, I'm a specialist of the Martian climate and atmosphere, and so I'm interested in many aspects of the science of the mission. As for us in our team, what we provide to the science team is tools which are in fact numerical models that simulate the Martian climate. So you all know weather forecast models that are used on the Earth or climate modeling, climate change models. So we do the same on Mars, and we try to understand what's going on. It's not easy because sometimes we have surprise, but most of the time, just on the basis of well-known equations, we can understand what's going on, and we hope that to have a lot of data feeding our investigation with the Hope probe.
Now, the interesting thing about the Hope probe is its elliptical orbit. It's quite unusual compared to previous missions. Why have the team behind the Emirates Mars mission chosen this elliptical orbit? What makes it so special?
Oh yeah, it's a very good idea. There are two big good reasons. The first one is that you know that we had already a space mission which has observed the climate and the meteorology, but most of the time they were operating in low orbit, so we will just see slices of the atmosphere. When you're far away, you can see everything at the same time. And it's good for several reasons. The first one is that you can see different local time. You can see the morning, noon, the afternoon. Before that, sometimes we only see some mission has always seen the afternoon, only the afternoon. We don't know Mars in the morning. It sounds stupid, but it's true. So we will have a good coverage of that. The other reason is that the orbit is well organized so that we will go down to 20,000 kilometer altitude, and then we will rotate the planet. So for 12 hours, we will see the same hemisphere. So if something happens, for instance, a dust storm starts, we'll monitor its evolution for 12 hours. And we have never done that before. So it's interesting. And then we will go up again. The planet will rotate below the spacecraft, and then we'll go back to another place and continue the investigation. So it's a completely new view. And I don't know if you realize, but we have very little, almost no nice images of the entire Mars planet. Usually we use image from Hubble, the Hubble Space Telescope, which is just near the Earth. With this mission, we have a lot of beautiful, big images of Mars, like with Mars crescents, and it will be a completely new for science, but also for the image of Mars as well.
I love hearing your excitement for this, Francois. I mean, it's palpable, you can tell. What are you looking forward to most? What are you hoping to see when those images start coming through?
So I told you I like the images, but from the scientific point of view, I can tell you what I'm looking forward to. It's a little technical. It's really the detail of the hour after hour evolution of what we call the diurnal cycle. You know, what is going on in the morning, the big clouds, and then they change in the morning, and then they disappear at noon, and then they start again. We don't have this information. And same for the temperature. We have atmospheric sounder able to measure the temperature in the atmosphere. We call that the temperature profile, and we will see the evolution. And me as a scientist, it will be exciting because I will see what we call thermal tide waves. So fluid dynamic stuff that are interesting for meteorologists like me. And it will be the first time.
It really is an incredible time, isn't it? And a lot of missions have failed at this. I think we saw around a dozen missions since the mid-60s attempt to go to Mars. Why have so many failed?
You asking me the question? Yeah, it's a good question for me because I've been involved in 2 missions that failed, 2 American missions. It's usually failed because of surprising, unexpected things. One I was on was Mars Observer in the 90s, and it failed because several days before orbit insertion, they started to prepare the engine, the rocket engine, and suddenly an explosion. It was lost. But the other failure is very interesting. It was in 1999, September 1999. The spacecraft, the Mars Climate Orbiter was the name, a little bit like Hope in some way regarding its science goal, was supposed to enter orbit at around 250 kilometer altitude. But instead it went through the atmosphere and burned. And the reason why, a very interesting problem, there were some disagreement, misunderstanding between the engineering team from the industrial company and NASA. They were using other units. They were using pounds, and NASA was using newtons. That's to measure the forces of the rocket engine. And this was the origin of the failure. So it was completely unexpected. I hope there won't be such a problem today.
I can tell you're obviously excited about this mission. Is there anything, though, that we won't be able to learn from this mission? What's the next stage? What's the next stage of the adventure possibly launched by the UAE that you'd like to find out about Mars?
There are so many things, because Mars is more than just one planet in some way, because we have the planet that we will observe today with the Hope mission, for instance, with this very rich meteorology and climate. But we also have the planet of the past, when Mars was covered by glaciers. I'm interested in that. When Mars was also, even before, covered by lakes and rivers. So we have lots of things, and it's full of mysteries. If we continue the science of hope regarding, I think the next step, if you ask me, will be to measure winds. It turns out it's a little technical, but we only measure temperature with this mission and the previous mission. And we now starting to have technology to measure winds from orbit. It's very difficult. And being a meteorologist, you see I'm very focused. I will dream of being able to measure winds and understand even better the winds and the meteorology on this planet.
Well, Francois, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your insights, and we look forward to being able to update you, hopefully within the next 20-25 minutes, about whether we have a signal from the Hope probe. Thank you. That is Francois Forguet, direct from Paris. Well, I've been told we have entered the blind officially. We are about 30 minutes without communication to the Hope probe. Now, of course, there is an 11-minute communication delay between the Hope probe and mission control back onto Earth. So there will be around 30 minutes as a total. We are hoping the earliest 8:08 p.m. this evening we may be receiving a signal that this mission has been a success. Although, of course, as the UAE leaders have said, even though there is a 50% chance of success rate, the project has already achieved 90% of its goals. Well, I'd like to welcome back our studio guest who's been patiently waiting here this evening with us. It is Fahad Al-Mahiri from the Space Agency. Fahad, thank you so much for staying with us. Now, one of the really interesting things about sending a rocket to Mars or anywhere is about 91% of it is made up of fuel. And you say the secret to getting man to Mars may be involved in bringing 3D printers up into space.
Well, going into that, this, as you mentioned, there's 91% fuel, right? Which means you only have a small percentage of resources that you can take with you. And today, it's really all the focus on ISRU, which is the really use of resources from space. And it's in situ resources. And this is where an example of 3D printing comes in, right? We're not going to be able to take the material with us, but if we have 3D printers and we're able to use the resources that are there either on Mars in the future or maybe even on the lunar surface and be able to use those materials and turn it into a material that you can use on 3D printers, you can start to make anything. Whether it's metal or plastic, it really all depends on what is there and what they're going to find. I think this is where Perseverance, that is going to be on the ground pretty soon, in 10 days on the 18th, I believe, is going to be interesting because that's going to be on the ground and it's going to be able to take a look at what's there.
So if I can ask, just to clarify, you say if we get up to Mars, we essentially could take a bunch of 3D printers and essentially create a brand new spacecraft in order to get us back to Earth.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as spacecraft, but maybe building a habitat, building tools, building equipment that's necessary. And what's really most important, basic human life requires water, requires oxygen. And if water is there, which we see a lot of evidence of, we can break that down. There's CO2 in the atmosphere, and if you have all of those together, you can actually create fuel, you can create oxygen, you have water, and if you have those three, there's a lot that can be done, and habitat is possible.
We can just see images now on our screen. I think they're going to come up in just a moment of the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. And, of course, that's the control room that we can see right there. The team there, of course, monitoring very closely the route and the course of the Hope probe over the last 7 months. Of course, deeply involved in the construction and the launch and the planning of it as well. And now, I would assume, Fahad, anxiously waiting for that signal to come through to let us know that it is in orbit around Mars. How do you think they're feeling right now?
Well, I mean, as of right now, of course, it's definitely going to be very nerve-wracking, as everybody has said already, because this is the time, I believe it was 7:42, so only 6 minutes ago, they would have started the burn. And this is expected to take up to 27 minutes. So the Hope probe is working autonomously right now. There is very little anyone can do because the signals of having to relay anything back or any new instructions isn't really possible at this time anymore. So it's fully reliant on the Hope probe itself to find its way.
Take us through the details of what the burn involves, because we were talking about the importance of bringing fuel up into space. They now have to get rid of about 50% of their fuel in order to slow down.
Yes, so you have 6 delta V thrusters, as they would call them, and this is basically changing the velocity. So they were averaging about 121,000 kilometers per hour. and that needs to be slowed down all the way to about 18,000 kilometers per hour. So during that period, there's and 27 minutes of these thrusters burning is a lot of time, and this is where the concerns are, right? There are possibilities that things could go wrong, as Francois had mentioned, right? But everybody has been doing the simulations, all the tests are there, and so hopefully we're confident and this works.
Well, when we do hopefully get that signal through, it will be to the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Centre that we go to receive the announcement. Probably one way or the other, we'll see that first here on Dubai One. Let's hand over now to Jad, though. He's down at Burj Plaza. Jad, what do you have for us?
So Jad's on location for us this evening down at Burj Plaza. He's had some fantastic guests earlier this evening. We spoke with Sahel Al-Masroui, the UAE Minister of Energy and Infrastructure. He's going to be continuing to update us throughout this evening. Jad, can you hear us down the line? I know there's lots going on there this evening. I believe you've got another special guest for us.
Well, Jad just seems to have a little bit of a problem hearing us at the moment, but I can see he's got a guest waiting, so we will catch up with him in just a moment's time. Of course, we were just talking about the printing, the 3D printing that could potentially revolutionise the space race, if I might call it that, although it seems like it's more of a collaboration these days, not just nation against nation, it's very much a partnership. And of course, I'm assuming now that with this interest in science in the UAE and burgeoning technology development is happening in this country. So one of our universities, they could be creating the next thing which helps us to go to that next stage of space exploration. How much development is taking place in the country at the moment?
There is a lot happening. We have 5 universities right now. We have several labs that have been created. You have the NSSTC in the Al Ain, the UAE University in Al Ain. You have the acoustic lab, which is the Khalifa University lab that's also being set up right now, together with the ASAT and the UAE Space Agency also funding the projects. So there's a lot happening. You would have heard a couple of weeks ago, University of Sharjah, they had some really interesting, astronomy finds with the 2 planets there. So there is a huge wave of things that's happening here. One of the things was talked about in terms of sharing the data, right? A lot of information is actually coming out of the US and other countries because the government pays for a lot of these initiatives and for those projects. It's funded by income tax, let's say, and taxes. So it's very public and that information is open and goes out to everybody. Here in the UAE, it's not the case, but our generous leadership is opening up the information and we're going to be sharing that data.
That's amazing.
And it's really all there to open that aspect up. It's for STEM, it's for everybody to just really engage and have data to work with and drive forward in these capabilities. So technologies are definitely always in the making, right? And the challenge of going to Mars is definitely going to need new technologies, but it's not to say that those technologies will only be required for Mars. A lot of those can also be utilized here on Earth. It'll improve efficiencies, make life better in many different ways, improve the quality of life. For instance, if we want to convert the CO2 in Mars' atmosphere into oxygen, this is something that's happening here today, CO2 capture, right? It's very expensive, it's very energy intensive. But now for the purposes of also going out to Mars and being able to have that technology, bringing it back to Earth would be really
fascinating,
interesting.
Isn't it? Right, let's see if we can catch up with Jad now down at Burj Plaza. Jad, over to you. Well, we seem to have trouble.
The UAE has been glowing in red in the past few days. We saw Burj Khalifa, we saw Dubai Frame, we saw the Museum of the Future. A lot of iconic buildings have been glowing in red to support and to show that we are all proud of this amazing mission to Mars. With me right now is Noura Al-Janahi, Project Resource Manager. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
How are you feeling today? How are you feeling right now, especially that we will know what's going to happen in the next few minutes?
I'm very proud to be a part of this mission. I'm very proud of the achievement that we were able to make. I would like to thank the leadership for the vision they had in order for us to reach to the state we're at now.
A lot of women were involved in the success of this mission. How do you feel about that?
I'm very honored to be one of the significant females that were part of this project. As you know, there were 34% of Emiratis, female Emiratis at the project, and I think it's the highest rate within a global project, and I'm very proud to be part of that.
And tell me more about your role as a project resource manager.
The project management team was basically monitoring and tracking the budget, schedule, and resources of the project. My role was to manage and monitor the human resources aspect of the project.
So I think it's time to see what's going to happen. We're both really excited. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Back to you guys in the studio.
And we've got a special show happening down at the Burj Khalifa. I can see that pictures are coming in right now of the world's tallest tower lighting up the Burj Khalifa this evening, displaying a united front to the world as the UAE aims to go down in history as the first Arab country sending a probe to Mars. Now, earlier this evening, we saw the Burj Khalifa light up in the leaders of the UAE faces. And we're continuing to enjoy a special light display. You can see 200 on the side of the building. That is symbolizing the 200 Emirati engineers, scientists and researchers, 409 kilometers. The journey the Hope probe has made from Earth to Mars is an incredible journey, and we'll be here tonight as we find out if the Hope probe is making it into Mars's orbit. 5.5 million hours of manpower has gone into this project, as we've just seen on the sides of the Burj Khalifa.
Remarkable sight, and this display, of course, I think it's around a 5-minute display that we're going to see here. This, of course, is happening just minutes before the earliest point at which we expect to receive that signal from the Hope probe, which I believe is around 8 minutes past 8 this evening. And of course, if we do get it at that point, that will be a very good sign, Fahad, won't it, that we are on the right course. 8:08, the signal comes through. How do we react in the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center? I'm guessing we will see a lot of very happy faces.
The signals are coming through from the Deep Space Network. So we're currently utilizing the big dishes over at Madrid. So there's a 70-meter dish and a 35-meter dish that are tracking. And as soon as that telemetry and that information comes through, it will get to the MBRSC Command and Control Center. And Imran will hopefully be giving us the news.
And it's, sorry, Katie, to interrupt, but it's not exactly an exact science, if I can put it like that. It could be any time between 8:08, maybe 8:12, 8:15. We're not entirely sure when we're going to get it, but we will be receiving it here first.
Yes, we do hope so. I mean, if it does get delayed, if there were any concerns or any issues during the phase of the burn, then we may have to wait until it comes back around Mars. So
well, it is 7:58, so only about 10 minutes until we get more of an idea. Now, I thought it was interesting. Earlier, we heard from some of our guests, as well as you, saying even if the probe doesn't quite go to plan this evening, issues still could be rectified. Of course, we do have a bit of a delay between the probe and Mars, but as long as it doesn't crash into the Mars planet, which is a potential, it should be okay. What are some of the issues that could potentially need to be fixed? I know we mentioned earlier, you said, if a fuse, catches alight. What are some of the issues that we might face and how they could be resolved?
So, as I mentioned, everything is happening autonomously right now, and there's very little we can do because the time frame really isn't there. Everything that we could have really done would have had to be done before this Mars.
Which I love, by the way, because it's kind of super cool that it's autonomous, but at the same time, it's kind of scary that we can't control it. It's all down to that programming.
But it's the programming, right? It's the simulations, and this is where things are planned, things are assumed, bad things are programmed in to say that, all right, what if this happens, and how the Mars probe should react. So it was mentioned as well, if we have one thruster go down, it'll actually shut two down because they're not centered and they're on the sides of the spacecraft. So just to keep the equilibrium, if one goes down for any reason, another goes down, and it'll still allow us to succeed orbit insertion, but it'll take longer.
Absolutely. It is an incredible journey. We are going to be finding out in about 8 or 9 minutes whether we have the first signal from Mars. But first, let's take a look at this incredible light display on the world's tallest tower, the Burj Khalifa in downtown Dubai.
حضورنا الكريم لقد مر المسبار في عدة مراحل ولكن أصعب
going to be checking in with Her Excellency Sarah Al Amiri in just a moment. We believe she's going to be making a big announcement on the progress of the UAE Mars mission. Well, Fahad, thank you so much for staying with us this evening. We were beginning to talk a little bit earlier about, obviously, it is an autonomous journey up there this evening. We were talking about some of the things that could go wrong, how potentially they could be fixed. There is a 50% success rate, whether the project goes ahead as planned or not. What are some of the big lessons we hope this project will bring us this far?
I mean, the journey up to this point has just been amazing for everybody. To actually have people have gone out and worked on this for the last 6 years, to have the team during the pandemic actually stay 4 months over in Japan because we couldn't rotate the team during that period due to the lockdowns. And just the success of getting the probe over to Japan at that time, past the ferry and into launch, and for the Emiratis to actually be there and experience all that was huge. Now this is, of course, going to be an opportunity for so many to look at and learn from, good or bad, whatever happens today. And this is history in the making at the end of the day.
What I really loved about that display we just saw was all of the facts and the details that were being projected onto the side of the Burj Khalifa there. You know, not everybody is aware of exactly what has gone into this. You know, the amazing facts that of the number of women who've been involved in this project, the fact that it's, you know, Emirati driven very much. There's collaborations with organisations all over the world, and 5.5 million hours of work has gone into this, and just the amount of knowledge that people in this country now have. And, you know, it kind of excites me to think that people who've been working on this project, Emiratis who've been working on this project, they could go and work for NASA in the States, they could go over to the UK, they could go and really lead up teams in other countries as well. This is going to have a huge wave effect.
Yes, I fully agree with that, and that's the exciting thing about this, and this is why, you know, the leadership didn't just want to do something small. They went all the way. You know, what is the hardest thing we could look at right now? And what is something that we can do to help humanity? And what is something to do that can inspire the youth, the Arab region? And you know, the Emirates Mars Mission Hope probe was that. So we are here today. There's a lot happening. Still, again, if everything goes well, it's going to be an amazing opportunity with the science data that's going to come through. And this is going to be shared, a lot is going to be learned, and this could open up the way for more missions in the future. As you already know, there have been announcements by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid on the Rashid rover. So this is as well another space exploration out onto the lunar surface.
Absolutely.
So exciting times ahead.
And I think one of the big focuses, we've mentioned it a little bit, about the importance of creating a knowledge-based economy. The fact that this space information is one goal, but certainly broadening our horizons and our economy here, moving away from hydrocarbons. Hydrocarbons, even tourism this year has been affected by COVID as well. Now, you've been involved in some really exciting announcements just this week. The opportunity for people to come and learn from some of the top universities in the UAE for free of charge. I'm going to ask you about that in just a moment, but first we've got some very special footage coming in live from the Burj Khalifa. Let's take a look at that on our screens. The Burj Khalifa in downtown Dubai, a very special message to the world tonight.
اتجاه المريخ تجنبا لوقوع أي حوادث من نظام الإطلاق اللي موجود حول المسبار. فيكون في عدة إجراءات تصحيحية للمسار عشان المسار اللي نحن نبغى ندخل فيه في المدار حول المريخ، وتم استخدام المحركات ولكن لبضعة ثواني ما يقارب 27 دقيقة اللي احنا ياسين نمر فيها. التغييرات اللي تستوي يتم حرق نصف كمية الوقود، ففي تغيير كبير في خزان الوقود، خاصة من جانب درجة الحرارة اللي موجودة. درجة الحرارة اللي موجودة في أجزاء مختلفة من المسبار، عشان شيء أخوي عمران يوم أعطانا الأبديت الأخير ذكر درجات الحرارة. درجات الحرارة مهمة جدا، والمسبار تم برمجتها أنه يتأكد بالحفاظ على الحرارة المناسبة للإلكترونيات اللي موجودة على متن المسبار، وأيضا على الأجهزة العلمية اللي موجودة على المسبار. ففي عدة عوامل تدخل في موضوع الدخول. نحن جربناه بأكثر قدر نقدر نجربه في الأرض، وتم وضع عدة سيناريوهات للتجريب نجاوب مع التجارب اللي موجودة، ويمكن التجربة الأخيرة نتائجها خلال الدقائق الجاية
إن شاء الله بإذن الله.
This evening in order to make sure that they can enter Mars's orbit. Now, as we heard earlier, our guest Fahad mentioned the fact that 91% of the weight on board these kinds of projects is made up of fuel. So this is a really important part, because in order to be able to lift off out of Earth's gravity, the Hope probe had to be able to travel at an incredible speed with a lot of fuel, but now is the time to slow down. So she's now explaining how they can find the location of the probe and really locate where it is. Earlier this evening we heard why the Hope probe was using star tracking equipment in order to keep it on track. And now we're trying to understand just where the Hope probe is at the moment. It is 8:07 this evening. We are expecting it could be as early as 8:08. We do get a signal from the Hope probe that they have entered Mars's orbit, a pivotal moment in history, not only for the UAE, but the entire world.
And of course, this message now not just being delivered to us, to you here in the UAE, and of course the wider region, but to people all around the world and the world's press as well. I was looking a little bit earlier before we came on air, and I was looking at the number of cameras, the amount of that are at this event today, and there are dozens and dozens down there. And this is very much going to be a message that's shared across the world. Her Excellency Sarah Al Amiri, of course, explaining all the details, not just to the dignitaries there and to the people that have been involved.
And Her Excellency has really been the face of this mission. We mentioned earlier how 80% of the Emirati science involved in this project are women. 30% of the entire team are women. The average age of people involved in this project was just 27. Now, Her Excellency herself is in her early 30s as well. It really is an incredible moment for UAE women and the country as a whole.
Her Excellency, of course, just talking about the fact that the further the probe travels away from the Earth, away from the control centre, the longer it takes for signals from the control centre to go to the probe, and of course signals to come back from the probe to Earth. And of course those signals are what we depend on to know that the probe is headed in the right direction. And so far we've had good news throughout the probe's journey over the last 7 months or so, just under 7 months. And of course now it enters that stage where it's just dependent upon itself, dependent upon its programming in order to achieve orbit around Mars. Prior to this point, it was guiding itself by its own star map within its own programming. We're going to go over now to the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center for a special announcement.
من قائد المهمة إلى جميع الفرق على الجميع الاستعداد لإجراء التقييم النهائي لصحة المسبار. أكرر على الجميع الاستعداد لإجراء التقييم النهائي لصحة المسبار.
شكرا لقائد المهمة. بعدنا نرتقب الأخبار من الخوانيج، فسامحين على المقاطعة معليش، فإذا نرجع لسؤال التواصل مع المسبار والبنية التحتية اللازمة.
المحطة الأرضية اللي شفناها حاليا تتلقى الإشارات من عند المسبار ويتم ترجمتها في الأجهزة اللي موجودة من قدام الشباب، إن كان في غرفة التحكم، ورا تشوفون شباب ياسين، هذه غرفة الهندسة المهندسين ياسين فيه.
The report will be coming in about 4 minutes. It is 8:10 in this evening. We knew we'd be able to get the signal as early as 8:08.
And you can see there, Katie, the countdown on the wall of the control centre, counting down 3 minutes and around 25 seconds, I believe, if my eyesight doesn't fail me. And that's the timeline. That's what they're looking at now to receive that signal from the Hope probe. Hopefully, good news will be received.
And it is incredible to think about this journey. The fact that, 50 years ago, the UAE was desert. We know that the United Arab Emirates will be celebrating its 50th anniversary of the formation of the 7 Emirates a little bit later this year. And to consider to be able to move from desert to Mars within just 50 years really is quite remarkable. Something no other country around the world has done before. And you can really feel the excitement. I think in the studio downtown at Dubai is palpable. I mean, Ray, you and I are expatriates. You've been here about 11 years. I've been here about 12 years. And to be announcement 6 years ago that there were plans to send a mission to Mars, and then to be here tonight, watch it happen in front of the world's eyes really is quite remarkable. You can see the brightest minds and experts of the UAE are in the control room there at the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, waiting any minute to find out if the UAE has made history.
Yeah, I believe it's just under around 2.5 minutes we have to wait, hopefully for that good news. The team there, you can see, looking quite anxious, but in control, very much in control. They've been preparing for this. This has been planned. And we're waiting here to see if the probe has entered Mars's orbit. And of course, a lot of communication going on at this stage. Even if we do receive good news tonight, which we hope that we do, there will be a period of around about two weeks plus where we just are going to be seeing if everything is still going according to plan, if the orbit is correct, and if everything that's on board the Hope probe is working. All those so vital scientific instruments with each of their key jobs to study the Martian atmosphere in their own unique way.
And even after that goes ahead, it will be a few months until the probe begins collecting that important science data that we've been talking about throughout this evening. The information is going to be bringing this data over the next 2 years. Then the project could actually be extended for another 2 years as well. And the questions it's going to help us answer is going to give us a better understanding of the climate here on Earth. We can see there is cheering, there's celebration.
That says it all. There is jubilation among the team down there at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center. They've received the good news. The Hope probe is in orbit around Mars.
The UAE has officially made history as only the 5th country in the world to reach the red planet. We mentioned the fact of millions of manpower hours involved, an incredible journey. Fahad, how are you feeling right now? What a moment.
The hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. I've got goosebumps. What an amazing achievement.
Now we're going to be going live for a special announcement direct from the centre.
قائد الفريق عمران، شرف ولحظة تاريخية للإمارات وللوطن العربي.
معليش، فهذه كما ذكرتم أصعب مرحلة، وطينا هذه المرحلة بنجاح. مهمات لكوكب المريخ أخرى تصل الأسبوع هذا إلى كوكب المريخ؟
في مهمتين غير
Fahad Al-Mahiri is continuing to stay with us. So I have to say there was excitement around in the studio. I think pre-COVID there might have been some high fives. We're going to celebrate from a distance. How are you feeling right now?
It's amazing, unbelievable. I'm so proud of the team. I'm so happy for the UAE, so happy for the Arab world, for the leadership, and just for the world, really. This has been such an amazing opportunity for everybody.
Okay, be honest. Did you ever dream that this would actually happen? I mean, I know we've hoped.
Okay, we're going to go direct to pictures from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, UAE Vice President, Prime Minister and ruler of Dubai, is at the Space Centre right now. It must be an incredible moment for His Highness to see his dreams come to fruition.
الإمارات يتخطى حدود الأرض وربما يصل إلى عنان السماء، وهذا ليس كلاما خطه القلم فحسب، بل إنما مثلما نشاهده الآن وصول الإشارة من قبل مسبار الأمل.
وصول مسبار الأمل إلى مدار الالتقاط الأول هو إنجاز لكافة الأمة العربية والإسلامية. سيدي صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن راشد آل مكتوم يقف الآن في مركز محمد بن راشد للفضاء ليهنئ فرق العمل.
أنتوا علينا، مبروكين أنتوا على شعب الإمارات، مبروكين على أمتنا العربية اللي حققتوه شرف لكم ولأهلكم ولبلادكم ولأمتكم. شيء ثاني، أريد أبارك لمعزبنا وشيخنا سيدي صاحب السمو الشيخ خليفة بن زايد، وللمعزب وتاج راسي أبو راشد اللي كان الدينامو الرئيسي وراء هذا الحدث. أبارك لحكام دولة الإمارات، أبارك لشعب دولة الإمارات الوفي المخلص اللي اليوم فرحته ما توصف. أنتم السبب بعد توفيق رب العالمين. ما ننسى صورة الشيخ زايد، وهذا التاريخ يذكرنا به اليوم. سنة الحياة يا عيالي، جيل يسلم الراية الجيل والحياة تمشي. هو بداها وانتم وصلتوا الحمد لله. الحمد لله. مشكورين على المجهود، مشكورين على المستوى، مشكورين على التشريف اللي شرفتونا به. رفعتوا راية بلادكم وسمعتها في المريخ. حفظكم ربي، جيل يشرف، ومبروكين مرة ثانية انتوا على بلادكم. سعدنا بشوفكم، فرحتنا كبيرة. حفظكم ربي. الحمد لله الحمد لله الحمد لله. تفضل بالعذر بس الضغطة الثانية عمران.
إذا رسميا الإمارات أول دولة عربية وخامس دولة في العالم العربي تصل إلى المريخ. نبارك لقيادة الإمارات وشعب الإمارات وشعوب الوطن العربي هذا الإنجاز التاريخي، ونعد العالم بالمزيد من الإنجازات التي نضعها في خدمة الإنسان والإنسانية.
شكرا لفريق مسبار الأمل ضمن مشروع الإمارات لاستكشاف المريخ، والشكر الأكبر.
مثلما سمعنا قبل قليل صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان يهنئ فريق العمل وأيضا يهنئ شعب الإمارات والكل من شارك في نجاح هذه المهمة. مسبار الأمل مفخرة جديدة تضاف إلى سجل الزاخرة الفخر.
So we're just hearing the UAE leaders have talked about the fact that Sheikh Zayed's goals, his vision, have really come to fruition. These incredibly ambitious vision, not just I think here for the UAE, but the message this sends to the Arab world of just what is possible. We saw the journey from people like Hazza Al-Mansouri, inspiring young children of what they can grow up to be. University students, we've seen a 12% increase in STEM education over the last few years, particularly which has been really increased since we've seen some major space projects come out of the UAE, particularly in women. We're seeing a really big uptake in STEM subjects being studied at university today. This is more than just a single project. It's going to lay the foundation for the UAE's extremely ambitious goal of putting the first human settlement on Mars by 2117. You can see the country's leaders coming together for a photo to celebrate this incredible milestone for the UAE ahead of its 50th anniversary of the formation of the Emirates. What a special night.
What an incredible moment for the team here, and obviously getting that news that the Hope of Mars, and then being congratulated by the leaders of the UAE, the united leaders of the UAE there, of course, just united in their joy and their praise for the team and their incredible achievement, the vision of the late Sheikh Zayed. After all of these years, it's been achieved today by the UAE, and it is just an incredible moment for her.
It is. I mean, it's such an honor to have the leadership be there as well at such a moment. You know, the efforts that the team have been putting in and the time that they've been putting in, and to now hear this news and for the leadership to be there, you know, to do this is just amazing. I'm sure each and every single one of them are never going to forget this.
Well, of course, mankind has always been obsessed with space. Learning more about other planets gives scientists on Earth a better understanding of our own atmosphere.
Oh, that's right, but there's always been a special interest in Mars. The two planets, Earth and Mars, share quite a similar length of day and seasons, but differ in many other ways. So my old friend Ray Addison went to find out a little bit more about what makes these two planets spin.
Why is the human race so driven to explore Mars? The motives are vast, including a desire to understand the conditions and climatic changes that have led to the erosion of the red planet's atmosphere. Great reasons, but why Mars in particular, and why not any other planet in our solar system? Well, that's because Mars and Earth are actually twins, with many similarities between them. The first of which is their geographical configuration. The two planets have the same area of land, despite the fact that the diameter of Mars is only slightly larger than the radius of the Earth. The geography of Mars is also similar to Earth's, with high mountains and valleys. However, Mars has the highest mountain peak in the solar system. The massive Olympus Mons towers approximately 25 kilometers above the surface of the red planet. Earth has the second highest peak in the solar system, but Mount Everest is a tiddler in comparison at just 8.8 kilometers above sea level. Mars is also home to the massive Mariner Valley at 4,000 kilometers long, 200 kilometers wide and 10,000 kilometers deep. It's one of the largest canyons in our solar system. It makes the deepest gully on Earth, the Yarlung Valley, look like a mere ditch at 500 kilometers long and 6 kilometers deep. And by the way, Americans, it also dwarfs your famous Grand Canyon, which is just 1.6 kilometers deep and 450 kilometers long. Both planets, Earth and Mars, have two permanent polar ice caps. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter discovered that fact in 2019. Now, back then, it found ice sheets accumulating over the planet's polar soil and extending 1 mile below the surface. In fact, the total volume of ice in Mars's poles is estimated at 3.2 million cubic kilometres. That's larger than all the ice in Greenland, which stands at 2.85 million. Well, do you want more similarities? Well, planet Earth and Mars both rotate around the Sun on a very similar tilt, which gives both planets 4 seasons. The difference is that Earth's seasons are distributed over 365 days, while on Mars they're spread over 687 days. Mars and Earth also have a similar day and night cycle. In fact, the length of a day on the red planet is just a tiny bit more than ours, at 24 hours and 39 minutes. Both planets have sunrises and sunsets. However, they are a very different colour. The fine dust in the Earth's atmosphere scatters the blues and greens coming from the Sun to give us yellow, orange and red colours. On Mars, the fine dust that is constantly around its atmosphere absorbs the blue light from the Sun and scatters the warm colours, making its sky more red in colour. On the other hand, dust particles on the horizon scatter the blue light, creating a blue halo effect. And if you've ever wondered what the sunlight looks like on Mars, well, it's equivalent to a partly cloudy afternoon on a regular Earth day. Not many of those here in Dubai. Well, if you just joined us tonight, where have you been? We've just had the amazing news that the Hope probe, the Emirates Mars mission, has been successful. It is now in orbit around the red planet. That makes us the first Arab country to achieve that amazing, incredible feat, and just the 5th country internationally. So we're going to take a quick break, but loads more still to come. We're going to talk about the financial impact that this achievement will have, not just on the UAE, but on the region. And we'll catch up with Jad down at Burj Plaza as well. So stay tuned.
Jackson.
Lisa, so what do you do?
As fate would have it, my business is all about you.
I'm not sure where you're going with this.
J.R. Joe Reisert. Your father?
Where did you get that?
Grabbed it off your dad's desk next to your graduation picture. You tell a flight attendant and your dad dies.
What can I do for you?
She's just had a really rough day. A death in the family.
Why are you doing this?
Somebody wants to send a big brash message. Do Dad a favor and stop gambling with his life.
Red Eye, Friday, 10 p.m. UAE, 6 p.m. GMT. On Dubai 1. This movie is brought to you by
الخير هو اختيار لواكر منبع الخير.
At the beginning of the 20th century, a mother dreams of marrying her 5 daughters to eligible bachelors. But marriage is not a priority in Elisabetta Benedito's life. Inspired by the work of Jane Austen comes this romantic period series. It is Austen like we've never seen. Pride and Passion. Tonight, 9 p.m. UAE, 5 p.m. GMT. On Dubai 1.
This program is brought to you by
Of the Iron Rose.
Welcome back. You are watching Dubai One's special live coverage of the Emirates mission to Mars. And what an incredible night so far. If you have just joined us, the UAE has gone down in history as only the first Arab country to ever reach Mars and the 5th in the world to reach the red planet. It has been wonderful to be a part of this journey and to watch the UAE leaders being able to celebrate at the Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, where we got the information only around maybe 5 or 7 minutes ago that the Hope probe was officially a success. Well, our next guest, you can see live pictures coming in there. Our next guest we're going to be speaking to in just a moment. Dr. Mike Kelly joined the Planetary Science Division at NASA headquarters in 2008. And today he serves as the program scientist for the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Mars Odyssey, Janus and NEO-WISE missions. He joins us now from Washington. Mike, thank you so much for being with us on such a special night. Now, you have been there at moments like this throughout your career. Just how special is this? What kind of thoughts will be going through the team at the Space Centre's headquarters this evening? Can you hear us? Well, we seem to be having a few technical delays, so we'll come back to Mike Kelly in just a moment.
Interesting to see there, though, Katie. Just a moment ago, we could see some of the hugely well-known buildings across the UAE lit up red, international buildings as well, lighting up red in recognition of this amazing achievement of the UAE, just the first Arab country and, of course, the 5th internationally to reach Mars with a probe, a successful mission on our very first attempt as well. It's a remarkable achievement. You can see there pictures of the Burj Khalifa, of course, lighting up in celebration. That's, of course, what the Burj Khalifa is known for. It's known for its light shows, it's known for its fireworks shows, and of course thousands of people down there at the Burj Plaza as well, celebrating and rejoicing with this amazing news, which is spreading not just across the UAE now, but across the region and the wider world. The news that everybody will be seeing tomorrow in their newspapers, on their television sets, that the UAE has reached Mars with the Hope probe on its very first attempt.
Absolutely. We are watching live pictures coming in of some major landmarks across the country. I have to say, each evening driving home on Sheikh Zayed Road, I've been enjoying seeing the Museum of the Future lit up in red as well. Just a few minutes ago, we saw the Burj Al Arab lit up in red. There is the Burj Khalifa, and it is wonderful being able to see the entire country being able to join together on such an incredible achievement. Well, we're going to be coming back to our special guest live from NASA, Mike Kelly, in just a moment. But first, the UAE's mission to Mars has some big goals, but environmental research is only part of it. The country wants to use it to transform global science and the economy, as well as the UAE space sector, and encourage a new generation of Emirati space scientists to take up STEM studies. Joining us in the studio live to discuss what lies ahead is HSBC's regional head of commercial banking for the MENA region and Turkey. It is Daniel Howlett. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us this evening. What a night. I know you've been watching the pictures that come in live. Again, we can see the Burj Khalifa lit up there. Well, I guess I want to begin by asking you, obviously we've seen low oil prices recently. We've even seen tourism take a hit, not just, UAE, regionally, internationally as well. So how important has this mission been in helping the country diversify away from high and really invest in a more tech-focused, knowledge-based economy?
Well, I think it's sort of hugely significant for the UAE. You've talked already about it being only the 5th nation to reach. Actually look at this in economic terms. I mean, they've spent about $6 billion on the program itself. That's already created 57 different space-related businesses and about 1,500 jobs. But in a global context, you've got an industry that generates around about $450 billion a year. And by 2040, Morgan Stanley estimate it'll be $1 trillion. So for the UAE to have a key role to play in space-related activity going forward in the region, I think is hugely significant. And then alongside that, if you think about the broader economic drivers for the Middle East and for the UAE, I think this positions the UAE from a science and innovation perspective. It transforms the economy from where it's been historically in oil and gas and tourism and travel.
How big is that impact going to be on jobs and how jobs change in this country from now on? Are we going to see a much bigger focus on tech jobs, on research and development as well? Are we going to see people coming over here to sort of take advantage of all of the university courses that have been created to sort of cater for this increased demand as well?
Well, I think that's a great question. So, candidly, I think it already is happening. If you look at the way in which the UAE has evolved over the last 50 years, it's been transformed. So if you look at Dubai today, 50 years ago, 50% of its GDP was from oil, and now it's 1%. We all know about how important it is from an international travel hub, particularly with the airports. But alongside that, people forget it's in the top 10 ports in the world already. So in education terms, I think the UAE will become a global hub, particularly for Africa in the region, for education. And we're seeing this with education technology, as well as with different courses, as you described, for space and related technology.
Daniel, stick around, if you don't mind. There's still lots more to talk to you about now, though. We just want to turn our attention now to Mike Kelly. He is, of course, a scientist at NASA Planetary Science Division, and he joins us now all the way from Washington. Mike, are you there?